Hope you're doing well. Have my brother reached out to me, or my half brother, I should say, reached out to me and said he wanted to come over and visit. And then I was like, it kind of jogged my thought process on something that I've been thinking about for a while, like many things. Um, he's 8 years younger than I am. He's got 11 kids. And he's like living his best life. Um, and so I was thinking about four things that are told so often that people just believe they're true. I mean, like, it's essentially like Inception, but not the way that Christopher Nolan depicted it in the movie Inception. Um, it's just, if you are told something over and over again, or if you hear it enough, you just repeat it as if it's true. You also may internalize it, and it changes the way you view reality. Um, and there are four things that, I mean, there's a couple other things, but these are the big four that you're told so often. Um, you believe it's true, um, or you might recite it, but you don't actually, it doesn't actually impact you. So like when you have a conversation with somebody, you'll just repeat it verbatim and not really think about it because you've heard it so often. Um, but you don't necessarily live that way. And by the way, I'm going to start this off by saying this isn't a right or left thing, although I will say that more of this particular mentality that I'm going to get into, you'll find more on the left than you will on the right. And this is fundamentally why the left is going essentially communist. They're saying socialist, uh, democratic socialism, but it's really communism. And it is because of what I'm about to talk about as to why it exists. So there's four things. There's global warming was going to end life as we know it. There was college is necessary. You have to go to college in order to get a job and make an earning. There is, you can't afford children. Children are expensive. They're just so expensive. And housing is unaffordable. I've talked about the lie about housing unaffordability in another video that I did last week. So I won't harp on that too much. But I will say this, there is a significant break in the way that people view things. And you can see this in polling. If you're in your 40s and above, you have a positive view on the US, you have a positive outlook on the economy, a positive to neutral, I will say that, a positive to neutral outlook on the economy. And you tend to be more on the side that says, uh, if you have college debt, you should pay it off. And so it's just interesting. This is, I would say, like my generation. I was born in the 80s. So I grew up with no internet. Atari had like come out, and then there was like TurboGrafx 16 and Nintendo and the Super Nintendo and Sega, which was amazing. All the rich kids, rich parents, the kids that I hung out with that had rich parents, or more wealthy or middle class parents, had Segas, and you wanted to go over and play Sonic the Hedgehog. It was amazing. But at any rate, we and everybody before my time grew up without the internet, and then slowly had the internet come up. We had, like, in the 90s, it was dial-up, and it was like a 7K modem, dial-up modem, and you had AOL or something else. And so you grew up without technology and this exposure to what other people were saying and doing. And so your news sources were limited. You had, if you had ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, that's where you're getting your news from. You might have where I grew up, it was the Washington Post, because it was in Northern Virginia. There's also USA Today. And then you had like New York Times. But the amount of places in which you get information was very, very limited. Um, and so things like global warming were easier to spread. I won't get into why any of this stuff is spread. I'm only going to talk about the fact that it is spread and that's not true. Um, so there was an entire generation. So from like the 80s on, they started pushing this narrative of global warming, global warming, global warming. The Earth's heating up. We had the ozone layer issues, and they were saying it's from aerosols and this, that, and the other. Who knows? It might have been. But the reality is that they were pushing this message and it was not true. You can find time after time throughout the decades where people were pushing climate alarmism, specifically around global warming, and that just didn't come true. And they were able to get away with that message until the mid to late 2000s. And the reason why the message changed from global warming catastrophe to climate change is because you could argue about global warming, right? Because it's just not, it's just, it does, I mean, it was rising so little, it was negligible. But you can't really argue necessarily with climate change. The climate is changing. The climate has always changed. And so they reframed it because people were just able to go back in time and look at all these articles of very influential people at the time saying that the world was going to end in 10 years or in the decade. Al Gore being one of those people who now comes out and says, oh, I was wrong about climate change or global warming. And the more importantly, the effects. And so there's an entire generation of people, and this ramped up. So I heard it a little bit in the 80s, and then in the 90s when I was like in middle school and high school. But it ramped up substantially in like I would say the early 2000s. And so an entire generation of people were brought up with climate alarmism. You could see this in people like Greta Thunberg, who like thinks the world is going to end, or that was the latest thing that she was worried about for a while. That's how she became famous, was climate alarmism. And you had an entire generation of these people growing up thinking the world was going to end in a decade. And even now, that even Al Gore and other very popular and influential people in this climate alarmism space had come out and said now that we were a little wrong in our projections and it's not changing as fast as we thought and this, that. There are people that are still out there saying the world is going to end in 10 years. They legitimately think it. They've been incepted because they've been told over and over and over and over and over from the time they were born through their 20s, elementary school, middle school, high school, college, even more so, grad school in some cases, that the world is going to end. And, activism is the way to go out and do it. And we need to, this is existential. And so in their mind, they believe this. It's obviously not true. The climate is changing. How it's going to change, we don't know. What affects it? Hey, we really don't know. We can say it's carbon. I mean, we can say it's a lot of things, but nobody's coming out and going, this is exactly it. And if we change this now, we can change the climate. Well, they are saying, oh, we need to get rid of fossil fuels and we need to reduce our reliance on, energy and this, that, and the other. We need to go full solar and we need to, okay, yeah, no, those are great ideas. We should generally go in that direction anyways. Burning stuff to get energy, not the most efficient way to do it. It's just logical, but the alarmists want to come out and then remove everything. And you have situations like Europe where there's a population of people that are dying because, they got a regular summer heat, which we experience here in the US on a regular basis. Like, they made bad energy choices because of climate alarmism. And now people are dying because of it. It's also why they can't do anything about Russia and Ukraine. If you're buying natural resources that you need in order to sustain your energy needs from a hostile nation, you put yourself at a disadvantage. But the internet effectively killed climate alarmism. It's going to take another probably 3 decades for it to work its way out of the system. There are still people in the education system that still are pushing this narrative. And so there's fewer and fewer people being exposed to this alarmism at a young age where you're very impressionable and where it can drastically affect your mind and the way you view the world. The other is college is necessary to make a living. This is just flat out not true. I will just say, outside of being a doctor, and when I say doctor, I'm talking about, someone who works in the ER, someone who is, a specialist of some kind, a dentist. Like, you have to learn these skills. The only way to learn them right now is to go through the lengthy process of, becoming a doctor, doing residency, spending a lot of money on education. That's currently the only way that it can be done. I think there are probably better ways to do it, but it's an entrenched system that's going to be very difficult to change. I mean, if there are any nurses that are watching this, you know that the schooling that you gets you prepared for 90% of what you see when you actually go out into the field and work under some of these doctors, and you're the one that's doing a majority of the work, minus you're doing heart surgery and things like that. That's where specialists come in, and that extra expertise is there. But even that, I would say, if a nurse is exposed to heart surgery or these other specialized kind of surgeries or treatments, there's no reason why they couldn't do it themselves, and not necessarily need a doctor. Maybe a doctor to come in and check the work and, essentially do what they do when you go get a physical, which is the nurse is doing all of the work, and then the doctor comes in, looks at the chart, and goes, "Yeah, you're good. I got to go see another patient." Like, I mean, generally speaking, all the other jobs that are out there, and I have a bunch of friends that are lawyers that believe, like, oh, going to law school is the only way that you can become a lawyer. Like, yeah, because the system is designed that way. But anybody with an internet connection can go on and learn how to be a lawyer and go in and defend themselves or defend other people. But you can't defend other people because you have to go to school. It requires school in order to do it. But generally speaking, you want to go into a marketing career, you want to go into a sales career, you want to go into coding. You don't need college to become a coder. Like, all of the other jobs, all the other office jobs, you can learn. And when you come out of college, generally speaking, you don't have any of that experience anyways, and you have to learn it when you get there. And yeah, they look at they depending on where you're applying, if it's a competitive market, yeah, your college education might matter, say New York or LA or San Francisco, where they can choose people based on this stupid hierarchical system. But if you're outside of those areas, companies will take you with no experience, and your willingness to learn will drive most of it. And also, by the way, starting at the ground level in a company, and then working your way up gives you exposure to so much more than you would ever learn in college, and so much more of how businesses work than you'll learn just going in as a manager straight out of college, which is usually what happens, which is so ridiculous. But like, I would say, like, I grew up in the internet hub of the East Coast, which is Northern Virginia. My first like real job was working for a telecommunications provider, an internet provider at the time. They were called Covad Communications back in the day. There was a bunch of ISPs that were out there. Not many of them exist today, but I worked in the dispatch center. I was sending out texts to install internet, basically DSL service, in New York City. That was my territory, was New York City. And like, I had no experience in doing that. That gave me exposure to basically the internet kind of age. And then I also went out in the field with some of the workers that were in Northern Virginia. It was required by, to do, so you could like learn what they do, learn how long it takes. So when you're scheduling, you can keep in mind some of the issues they run into. But when you go out in the field, you learn a lot about the installation and you learn a lot about the service itself. You're able to talk to these techs. You go to the data centers and you learn a lot about how data centers work and the architecture and this, that, and the other. All of that is just on the job learning. And literally, you can do it for any job. It is a lie. It's a debt trap for some people, for sure, especially if you're not great with your finances. Spending a ton of money to go get a liberal arts degree at a very expensive university does not have a high ROI, and many people do that. Personal opinion, I think only certain degrees should be able to qualify for student loans. If you're going in for a women's studies degree or a sex studies degree, like, no, absolutely not. There aren't many jobs out there that cover that, that would pay that back. And it's absolutely ridiculous to get a 4-year degree for that and expect that you're going to go into the workforce. Only jobs you tend to go into are super woke jobs, like being a DEI person at an office that just makes people angry. But even those are dying in positions as companies get rid of DEI in general. The other one, and this is what I'm getting back to about my brother. My brother has 11 kids. I'm bad. He's had so many. It's ridiculous. And he's 8 years younger than I am. I have 0 kids. I want to have kids. And may try to have kids within a very short time. But someone, I would say, who didn't make a lot of money, has 11 kids. Now, his life has changed over time. His income has gone up. But you have 11 kids. I mean, it's Christmas. The uncle here is stepping in to pick up some Christmas presents for the kids, because there's no way that he's buying 8 or 9 presents per kid. That's just breaking the bank. It's just not realistic. So it's different level of expectations within his family on certain things that other families who might have 1 kid or no kids take for granted. But you can't afford to have children. This is a lie. I guarantee if anybody watching this went to their parents and asked them how much money they were making when they had their first kid, I think they'd be very surprised. I think they might also be surprised to find out that they might not have been planned, like myself. There wasn't a whole lot of availability at a certain period of time for birth control. So people hooked up, had kids. That was the thing. And the first kid, in many instances, was an accidental kid, followed by, a bunch of planned kids. But the idea that you have to make a certain amount of money in order to have a kid is a lie. And it's a lie that's told so often people believe it. So much so that birth rates are dropping because of it. And it's due to that. It's due to people being told it. It's also due to social media and the psychology of social media. Again, I grew up in a generation that had it much later in life. Like, I didn't get a Facebook account until I think when it opened up to the public, non Ivy League schools. I think in 2005 or 2006. It was actually, I think, just before I moved to New York. I had a MySpace account. That's how everybody had what Ted or Tim or whatever his name was your first friend on MySpace, but didn't really have social media, and social media wasn't used in the same way that it is today. Social media was used as a legitimate way to connect with your friends because everybody was off at college or they started doing their own things, and so you'd want to connect with them, and you would use it as a basically a chat, because you could use MySpace chat, or you could look at their pictures and then comment and do things, and you're like, oh, this is my friend's doing. Now it's very different. It's escalated from that. Now the psychology of social media is to present a fake version of yourself, and then present that to the people that follow you, which are your friends. And I would say everybody probably watching this has that friend who goes on a trip to, say, Mexico, or Europe, for like a long weekend, or maybe a week long stay. They go to Cabo, they go to like wherever, like, and then they come back and they proceed to post for a month as if they are on vacation still. They just slowly trickle out the vacation photos to present to to give people the impression that they're living this lifestyle of like luxury and all this travel, when they are not. And for men, it doesn't necessarily affect us the same way, because we view things on social media, what we find interesting is very different than what women find interesting. So you have this abundance of people posting online, specifically women, that they're living this lifestyle that they're not living, and then other women see that and then want to live that lifestyle, and then they proceed to do the same thing. So it's this entire cyclical kind of cycle of women posting on there, doing things and living in ways which are just not real to themselves. And I will caveat this and say, yes, I wear sunglasses and a hat, because I don't want my identity necessarily known to the internet. But the things I talk about on this are the same things that I will talk about with my friends if politics happens to come up. These are my thoughts and my thoughts alone. I am this person without the sunglasses and hat on as I am with them. But again, like, women continue to live in this altered state of reality where they're surrounded by all of these other women that are doing things that they want to be doing. And then they're psychologically impacted by that. The other way is that if you live in New York City, you don't have friends that have kids. And so psychologically, you're able to not be in that mindset. And again, everybody knows this who lives in, say, New York City or LA or San Francisco, who aren't originally from those areas or maybe live in those areas. You have friends that live in the towns that you grew up in, that have kids and are living a great life, but the way that you view it is, oh man, they've got to get up early, and they've got to save money, and this, that, and the other, and they've got to like daycare and this. I just get up and I go out and have fun and like whatever. Yeah, because you're surrounded by that. So psychologically, you're in the mindset that this is normal. It is not normal. It took me, by the way, almost 17 years. Actually, it wasn't 17 years. It was till COVID to realize that I need to get the F out of New York City, because I'm aging up. I do not want to be doing this. I have a very finite window with my girlfriend and I to be able to have kids. We won't, and if I don't want to have kids in New York City, because this place is a trash heap, and I don't want my kids walking around homeless people and garbage every day and getting them used to that and thinking that is real life, or like turning 16 and slipping into bars. Like, I don't want my kids exposed to that. That is not real life, and that exposure warps your sense of reality for forevermore. And you only realize it when you're coming from the outside in and staying there. Again, I moved there in 2007. I left in 2024. Yeah, I got to think about it. It's 2026 now, 2024. And like, it's no. But the psychology of seeing this stuff puts women in a place in which they don't want to have kids. For men, it's very similar. you're caught up in like being surrounded by all these attractive women all the time. So you stay in this perpetual dating cycle, which is not healthy and not conducive. But fortunately for men, or unfortunately for women, men can have kids in infinitum. We don't really age out of having kids, but women do. And so the reason why people believe that you can't afford kids is because most of the people saying this and absorbing it, or most people saying it, by the way, have kids already. And they're just broadcasting something out for reasons I do not know. It's kind of mind boggling a little bit. But it's also by people that live in these environments and are exposed to the high cost of living that are saying, like, oh, you can't afford to have kids. Meanwhile, I had people that I knew that had kids in New York City, and they just make it work. The reality is that your mentality has to change about what's important to you. Is it going to the bar and going to the club and, going to brunch on Saturdays and Sundays, and like, is that important to you? Is that what's important to you for the rest of your life? Or are you willing to sacrifice that for something that is clearly, in my opinion, greater in value and importance, which is like having a child? And most of the people that have children will tell you it's the greatest thing that's happened to them. They will also say, yeah, like I just, like they don't go out anymore. Like you text them and they're like, hey, we're doing this. Like, you got to get up early tomorrow. We're doing this. We're doing that. Like whatever. The priorities fundamentally change. And this leads into the same thing about housing unaffordability, which I've talked in another stream about why it's complete bullshit. Again, people are told this over and over and over and over. All you people that I watch, I'm not going to name any names, but there's a lot of right-leaning social media people that talk about how housing is unaffordable, yet they own a house and they actually have a business of their own. And they're saying it because it's incepted into their brain. You hear it so much, you just believe it to be true, or it's just like it's like a reactionary response. Yeah, housing's unaffordable. Again, I ask anybody watching this video to go ask their parents how much they were making when they bought their first house. I think you'll be very surprised. I would also ask you, like, what did they, like, how did they save up the money to buy the house? And they'll tell you most likely that they saved by sacrificing. They chose not to do other things. They made financial decisions that were different from the people that they were hanging out with. And that is the hardest thing to do by far. So what it comes down to is there's a series of ways that people are being incepted, um, and having essentially a false reality planted on them. And some people are able to essentially like have the cognitive dissonance to like be able to still function, and do the opposite things, even though simultaneously they will say that housing is unaffordable and they bought a house, that children are expensive, or you can't afford children, so don't have them, but they have multiple kids, or they didn't get a college degree and they make a ton of money, they enjoy their career, but they will say, yeah, getting a college degree will really help. These things, it's not reality. The reason why people have things, whether it's kids, whether it's a house, whether it's a good job and making a decent amount of money, is because they worked for it. And this is the fundamental difference again, this isn't necessarily a right or left thing, but this is where the left is leaning into. Many people within the left, I won't say a majority, I'm going to say a very vocal minority, which is winning in races in New York and Colorado now and California, soon to be Maine, Graham Plattner. But like these people have things, and it's kind of interesting to hear these people like legitimately believe it, but like, and then push that message out, even though just the reality of it is if you make different decisions, you can have things. If you choose not to spend $2,700 a month or $3,000 or $4,000 a month in rent in a place in New York City, you can buy a house. You can buy a townhouse. You can buy an apartment or a townhouse in most major suburban areas uh, in the U.S. But if you're stuck in New York City and you're spending all this money and you're looking locally, your sense of reality is warped. Then you also, on top of that, have people telling you all the time that you can't afford to do the things that you really wish you could do. You just never try to actually do those things. And again, there are people that will hear this and still be able to break out. I will admit I'm one of those people, um, especially when it comes to affordability of children and owning a house. Both take significant personal sacrifices in order to achieve. And kids, it's a personal sacrifice for the rest of your life. But it is something that is beyond you. You're raising someone else. Like it's not like single people having animals and saying that they're their children. It's not the same at all. Um, I would say there's other really good examples of this mindset. I would say anybody that's um, successful and a minority uh, posting on social media about how minorities are repressed, clear cognitive dissonance. How were they successful if they truly believe that? You have NBA players, NFL football players going out and saying that they deal with oppression when they go out. Where do they deal with oppression? I mean, are they wiping their tears away with the millions of dollars that they're making because they worked hard and were less than they were like a dominant athlete? They were like the 0.01% of like athletes, of like elite people, like physical specimens, men or women, by the way. And they're going to go out and say that they're oppressed. Like, again, this all feeds into the same thing. It's all about being fed a message so often that you believe it to be true, even though everything in your own life is telling you otherwise. So I will leave it on this. I went over 4 things: global warming, which is now climate change. It's just not something that people need to be worried about. College is required to make a living. I would highly recommend, if you have kids, push them in the direction of a trade school. They will find probably more job satisfaction and more money over time. And by the way, less ability for AI to take their job than someone working in a white collar office. And again, everything can be learned, but it's up to you, the individual, to want to learn to do those things. Can't afford children, it's BS. And housing is unaffordable, which is also BS. If you just take a step out and look at how you're living your life, You could probably find ways to save money. You could probably find ways to make an advancement in your career if you really want to. But if you want to wake up every day and be concerned about what your friends are doing, and again, this is probably easier for men than it is for women just because of psychology. But if you want to wake up every day and be concerned with what your friends are doing, and how successful they might be, or the vacations that they're taking, and be caught up in that, you're going to hold yourself back. If you believe that you can't achieve something, you're going to hold yourself back. Everybody has the abilities to succeed in life if you want it. And I would say living in the US is probably the one place in the world where you can do that. This is also why nobody talks about Asian immigrants. They just view them as non-existent. They'll say Black Americans and Spanish American or Latin Americans like struggle so hard. Meanwhile, you have first generation, even Africans, uh, Africans, Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Southeast Asian, Indian, Pakistani. You have all these people coming over. Within one generation, they're making tons of money. And it's because of the mindset. It's 100% because of the mindset. And like, it's up to you whether or not you want to believe all of this BS and live your life through the lens of how you compare yourself to others or how you compare to others, or just taking a step back and going, that's not real life. And I control what I want to do in life and who I can potentially be. And I didn't mean for this to be like some kind of uplifting kind of whatever speech. I'm not a Patrick Bet-David by any stroke of the imagination, but he's right on everything that he says. Just about everything. I would say there's some disagreements there, but you can predict and you have control over outcomes. All of this other stuff is just noise holding you back. And in my opinion, it's sometimes intentional. But you can succeed. I see it every day, and you can look around and see that people are successful, and you can talk to them about what they had to do, and you're going to find the same story across all of them, which is that they worked hard, they sacrificed a lot, and they made it happen. And even when they didn't have the means to do it, they still made it work. And this is especially on the point for children. And again, I urge any one of you watching this to go ask your parents if they're still alive. Hopefully, everybody watching this, your parents are still alive, and ask them, how are you able to afford your first house? What did you do? Hey, when you were kids, were we all planned, or did you just kind of make it work? And then once you had one, did you just find enjoyment and then you wanted to have more? Like, I ask the question. I think you'll be very surprised in the answer. But on that note, I have talked way too long. I was trying to keep this under 30 minutes. I've clearly gone over. But let me know what your parents say in the comment section below, or what you think about this in the comment section below. And like and subscribe if you like this content and you want to see more. Again, I talk about a lot of things. Obviously, this was one thing that I'm probably going to talk about more often than not, because I personally believe everybody is capable of so much more, and that all of this stuff is just distraction. And you can personally achieve anything you want to, because I've personally done it myself. And I wouldn't say that I'm, the most outgoing and like hardworking person. I work relatively hard. There are people that work much harder than me. And I just think to myself, if I do this or I do this or I make this change here, I can make things happen. I did it. I bought a house. I didn't go to college. I make a decent amount of money. I'm just going to leave it at that. I want to have kids. I'm not worried about the cost. And that's not because of the money that I make or the money that I have in the bank. It's because I know I'll just make it work, and I don't mind sacrificing for certain things. But again, let me know what you think in the comment section below. And as always, keep moving. Thanks.